All right, in this series of videos, we're going to create a web application from scratch using only the Java programming language. No HTML, no JavaScript at all. Yeah, we will have to touch a little bit of XML and maybe configuration files, but it's super easy to understand. And so here's the plan. So first, we are going to create a new project from scratch again. Then we're going to implement authentication and authorization using Spring Security. We are going to implement a CRUD view, that is create, read, update, and delete with database connectivity. We are going to then add a form that has collaborative features, and it's going to be really, really interesting. Then we're going to add a view to show a report that you can export to, for example, PDF or comment separated values, and many other formats, actually. And then the icing on the cake for this project is to add cookie consent dialog, and that's very, very easy to do with Vaadin. So let's start with the first step, setting up the project. All right, so I'm going to use IntelliJ IDEA for this project, and let's just go ahead and create a new one using the Spring initializer. I'm going to leave all these as it is. I'm just going to change here to Java 17. Next, we are going to use Spring Boot Dev Tools, Lombok, so that we don't have to code getters, setters, and all that. We're going to use Spring Security here. Of course, we are going to use my favorite web framework for Java, which is Vaadin, and we are going to use Spring Data JPA, and let's use also my favorite database, MariaDB. Finish, and let me show you what we have here by default. So we have a bunch of files here that we are not interested in, but the important part is that you get the source here with just one Java class, which has a public static void main. This is kind of the entry point of a standard Java application, and in this case it's a Spring Boot application. But before we continue, let me add some other dependencies that I need for this project. So I'm gonna go to vaadin.com/directory, which is a place where you can find third-party components for Vaadin. And I promised I would create a CRUD view, right? And so there's a component that allows you to do that very, very easily. CRUD UI add-on, which I created some years ago. So let's copy first the repository, the Maven repository, and let's add it. I don't think there's a repositories section, so we need to add that here. And let's add the repository there. Now let's copy the dependency. I'm gonna add it just right after Vaadin Spring Boot starter. What else do we need to do here? I think that's it. So we also need an add-on to easily create reports later in a later video. So let's copy the dependency and add it here. We don't need to copy the repository because it's the same. But we are going to also use the collaboration engine from Vaadin, which I think I can find here. Let's copy this, added. Another thing I want to do is to use maybe the latest version of Vaadin. So let's check that here, releases. And so it's at 21.06 as of today. Let me click over here. And also maybe the collaboration engine, let's use the latest version. Here it is. There we go. We refresh the Maven project so that the IDE knows which dependencies it should use, and I think this should be ready. Okay. Now let's configure a couple of things here. So in the application.properties file, we need to configure the database connection. So that would be spring.datasource URL. And okay, so for the URL, let's create a new connection here inside my IDE MariaDB. And I have one server running already. I think my user is root. Let's use root. Don't do this in production, of course. And I think my password is password. Succeeded. All right. So yeah, it's working. Apply. Let's copy this URL, and that's what we are going to use right here. Now, maybe I should create a schema here. So let's create a new schema, which is kind of a database inside MariaDB. Let's call these books. Okay, so we should have it there. And there are no tables, but JPA is going to create that. /books. We need to specify the name of the database and the connection URL. Now let's go ahead and use or configure the username and the password. And another thing that I'd like to do is to configure DDL auto from Hibernate to, let's use update here, so it creates the databases or the objects in the database. Another thing I want to do is writing a specific, writing whitelisted packages. That's going to be useful for or makes the compilation much quicker. So we're going to add this package over here, com example demo. And this could be a list of packages separated by a comma or by commas. So we need to add also com.vaadin because we need anything that comes from those packages, anything that is related to Vaadin, we should add it here. Org.vaadin because there are add-ons, and if you have your own add-ons, and you add here more packages. Always remember to do that. I hope I didn't make any mistakes here, but I think we'll get an error if I don't do this correctly. So let's double check com example demo, com.vaadin, org.vaadin. I think that should be all right. I guess we have configured the project now. All right, so now that we have the application ready and configured, we can create a backend. So we're going to add an entity, a repository, and a service class that the UI can use to retrieve data, to write data, to update data, whatever it needs to do with the database. Okay, so we need 2 packages here. Let's create one for the backend. And we will need another one for later for the UI. Just so you get the idea of what the structure of the project is. And let's start by creating a new Java class called book. And book is going to be an entity or a Java object that encapsulates, you guessed it, information about books, private long ID, private string title, private, let's add maybe a local date for published, when the book was published, private, let's create an integer for the rating of this book, how good the book is. I think that should be it. And since we are using Lombok, I can just add data here. Maybe actually we need an all or no args constructor, and let's be explicit here, all args constructor, and also the equals and hash code. I really want it to be only on the ID, so I'm going to include the ID. And we now have a POJO, right? Plain old Java object that we can map to a table in the database. So let's use JPA for that, entity. And because it's an entity, it needs an ID. And we are going to generate this value using the strategy identity. So it's going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so forth for the IDs. We don't need to specify the IDs now. I guess that's it. Now we have everything. So just to show you what we have actually is all the setters and getters, and we have 2 constructors and equals and hash code using the ID field here. Okay, very good. We have that class ready. Now let's create a new book repository. This is very easy to do. Repository. This is actually optional, but I like to be explicit there. And it's not a class, it's an interface. We're going to extend JPA repository from Spring Data. And it's a repository of books which have IDs of type long. And just with that, we have now a bunch of very useful methods to interact with the database, like count, delete, find all, save, and so forth. We don't need to implement this again. We can just inject instances of this type, and Spring Framework is going to create them automatically for us, and Spring Data is going to implement the class or the interface. All right, so we have the repository, but it would be good to have also a book service that the UI can use. And here I do need to specify service. And let's extend one of the classes that are provided by the CRUD UI add-on, which is CRUD Listener. And it's a CRUD Listener of books. You'll see why later in the video, but this also allows me to quickly implement these methods over here. So first of all, these are books. So I'm gonna just change this to book. And we probably need, it's not extends, it's actually implements. This is an interface. I can show you the interface here. Very simple one. But we probably need the book repository, right? Let's call this repository. And let's use Lombok here to have required arts constructors. I can show you that too. We have these constructor, we don't have to implement it. And Spring is going to inject an instance of this type. So this is not null anymore, and we can use it. Repository.findAll, repository.save book, and in fact, update is exactly the same. And here repository.delete book. And I guess that's about it. We have the service class implemented, and in fact, we have the whole backend implemented now. So this is step 3 of the tutorial, where we are going to implement authentication and authorization using Spring Security. So this means creating a login screen with username and password, and then securing views so that only users with a determined role can access these views, all right? So let's just jump into the code. So let's configure Spring Security here. And since Vaadin 21, I believe, there is a helper class that allows us to configure that very, very easily, and it's called Vaadin Web Security Configurer Adapter. So we have to extend that class, and we need to override a couple of things here. So the first one is configure with the HTTP security object here. And what we're going to do here is set a login view that we're going to create in a moment. So let's call that login view.class. It doesn't exist, but we're going to create it in a moment. Then we need to override also the user detail service bean method to create some users so we can play with something, right? And this is a bean, so I need to mark it as a bean here. And instead of returning this, we're going to return a new in-memory user details manager that receives, for example, an array of user details objects. And one way to create those is, let me format this like that, is by using the user class over here, and then configure this, for example, with username. Let's create one for me, Alejandro. Password is going to be password, and this is going to be encrypted, or it's going to use an encoder. So we're going to use one that it's no operation. This is the easiest way to do it, just to specify this here. Don't do that at home, or at least not in production. Use a proper encoder, password encoder. Then we can also specify the list of roles. We're going to use only one role in this example application, admin. And after that, we can just build the object. So this is the builder pattern. And we can create another one separated by a comma here because it's an array of objects for, let's say, Maria. And you know what? Let's change this only to the letter P so that it's easier to type later when I'm using the app in the browser. Okay, so we have configured the web security using Spring Security. Now we just need to create this class, and it is extremely simple. Let's create this in the UI package because it's a view. So it's gonna go here. There it is. And this, of course, is a Vaadin view, so it requires a route. For example, logging. It could be anything really. This is so that we go to /logging, and then we'll see this view that we are going to implement here. And here's the first trick of this tutorial. It's very easy to implement this actually by extending composite of login overlay. And then here in the constructor, what we can do is, let me say first this related problem here. What is going on? Maybe it requires the import. It's not that. Let's read the message. How can I read the message? Oh, yeah, I forgot something here, so I wasn't paying attention to the parameters. I need to pass the HTTP object as well. All right, now it's compiling. Very good. And back to the login view. All we need to do here is get the content, which is this login overlay. It's going to return an object of that type. And then set opened true because it's an overlay, right? It's going to be on top of the screen. So we need to open it. And then set action logging. So it's going to use /logging using the post, using post instead of get. So it's not going to clash with this, right? And Spring Security is going to manage that authentication for us. We really don't need to do anything else here. It's very little code, and we get a logging view. Now, we probably need a couple of views to check that the authentication and authorization is working. So let's create first a home view, route empty, so /empty, nothing, because if it's a home view, so it makes sense. Vertical layout. Let's use vertical layout here. And oops, where did it go? Let me see. Here it is. A constructor where we are going to simply, for now, let's just add a new h1 component. So a new title, home view. Let's format this like that so we can add more things easier later, right? And we need to say, hey, this is for everybody. You need to have a user registered in this. You need to be Alejandro or Maria, which are the users we created, in order to see this view. So we mark this with anonymous allowed. And now we can check that part. And let's create another view, admin view, route /admin. Again, extends vertical layout. And let's create something similar here. So let's add a new h1 admin view. We need to specify the roles. So roles allowed from this package, admin, because all uppercase, because that's what we use in the configuration here for these two users. All right. Very good. So we have, I guess, something we can try. The first time you, if you are following this, you are trying this by yourself. The first time you run this application takes a bit longer than subsequent runs, but it shouldn't be a lot of time though. Let's see how it goes this time. The reason is because it has to download all the Maven dependencies, which maybe in my case I Maybe I had those already, but it also has to build the front end and download the client-side dependencies. So that's what this is doing right now. That's what front-end compilation means. And once we get it ready, we should be able to see the application here, home view, so it works. But if I go to admin, we should see the login form. There we go. So we didn't code this thing and it shows the login form automatically, which is so cool. So let's try with my username here. The password was just one letter, login. And now I can see the admin view as well. All right, so we are on step 4 of the tutorial where we are going to create a CRUD. CRUD means create, read, update, and delete. So it's going to be a view with all these operations. And this view is going to connect to the MariaDB database to allow the user to create new books or to edit the books or delete the book and so forth. So let's jump right into the code. Okay, so this is the admin view, right? The one that it's used by users with the role admin. So it's protected, let's say, by Spring Security. And now we want to create this CRUD. So we're going to add it here, CRUD. And that is, let's create it here, a new grid CRUD, which comes from the add-on CRUD UI. And you need to specify here the type. It's a CRUD of books. So that's what we'll specify here. And believe it or not, only with that we have the user interface for CRUD view. So let's check that out. There we go. So we have the options to add a new book. We have a grid or a table. It's called grid inviting with all the books and one column per property in the book class, and we can add new books here. Of course, it doesn't really work yet. It doesn't really save the item as it says there because it's not connected to the backend. So how can we do that? That's pretty simple. So we need to add here, or actually before that, I just noticed that we have the ID here, and maybe this is not in the best order possible, the columns, and the same for the form. So let's configure that. That's very easy to do. So we can just get the grid, which is a Vaadin component, right? And we can set the columns using the names of the properties in the domain object or domain class, which is book. So we're going to use title, published, and rating. Title, published, rating, and now it's going to show only those columns there. And for the form, to configure the form, we need to get the CRUD form factory, and again set visible properties. It's going to be the same. I want to use exactly the same. So let's just copy from there to avoid typos. I hope I didn't make any typos. Let's try that out actually before continuing to see that the UI looks the way we want. Title, published, rating, that's good. Now we don't have the ID here and we only have these 3 fields. All right, very good. So let's connect that to the backend, and the backend is book service. Let's call it service here. And if you have a look at this constructors, there's one that accepts a CRUD form, CRUD listener. And remember that we did that before in the previous video? CRUD listener, we implemented that. That means that to connect this to the backend, all we have to do is pass the service class there. And that should be it, really. So we should be able to save data using this view. So let's try that out. Let's add my recent book, Practical Vaadin, published. It's very recent. I think it's just some months ago, a couple of months ago. I'm going to give it a rating of 10 out of 10 to this book. Add. There we go. We have it there. Let's add another one. Whatever, published, I don't know, another year just for fun. And any number here. add. So this is actually in the database, and we can check that. Let me just refresh this maybe. And we have the book table. This is an SQL client, and you see that inside the database, you have the 2 rows in this table. Pretty cool, huh? Yeah, so that's how you can implement a CRUD using Vaadin. So we are now on step 5 of this tutorial, where we are going to create a form with collaborative features. That is, we're going to allow the users to see what the other users are doing in real time. That's pretty cool, very easy to do actually with Vaadin. So let's jump right into the code. So let's say we don't want this option here. They want to create a new book. We don't want it here in this screen. We want to redirect to another view and make that collaborative. How can we do that? First, we need to hide this option, but that's very simple. If we go to the code admin view where I have the grid CRUD, we can just say CRUD.set add operation visible false. So it's not going to show that. And instead, we want to get the CRUD layout, which is the organic kind of the component that contains all these other components and the arrangement there. And we're going to add a toolbar component. A toolbar component is something shown next to these buttons here. And we can add just a new router link, which accepts text first, new book, and then we can pass a component. So let's say this is new view.class, which doesn't exist. But again, we can just create it there in the same package. So it's right here, new view. Let's map this to new. So / new again. Instead of component, we're going to use vertical layout. And just to quickly check that this works, let's add a title here, new h1, new book. Let's compile this. And we should get a link here that goes to the new book. But I want to show you something as well. So new book, it says could not navigate to new, recent access denied. So that's important. Security is working. Roles allowed. We need to allow the group of admin users here, right? So now I should be able to go there. Very good. So we have that in place. Now we want to create this form from scratch. Let's create all the fields, the input fields here. Private text field. So one for the title. Title, private, what else was there? Let me actually refresh my memory. Title, published, and rating. So this would be a date picker for published. New date picker, and we need one integer field for the rating. Something important is that the names of the identifiers here match the exact name of the properties in the book class, because we are going to do some data binding here. But for that, let's add those fields to the vertical layout, but I'm not going to add them directly there. I'm going to create first a form layout, and then we can add the title, published, and rating components here. Of course, we need to separate these guys from with a comma. We probably also need the title before the form, so let's change the position of that, and we will need a new button to save the changes. Let's check that the UI looks the way we want. There we go. So you have all the components here. This is a date picker, and the cool thing about the form layout is that it's responsive. So for example, if I make this window narrow, you see how it changes. So this maybe would be how the application would be presented in a mobile device. And you can configure the number of columns here. It's called steps or responsive steps, and several other things in this form layout if you want. Okay, so if we click this, it doesn't work. So we need to first bind the values in these input fields to an instance of book, right? So to the corresponding properties in an object of this type. How to do that? Actually, it's pretty simple. We need a new binder here. And binder is a helper class. It's not a UI component, it's just a helper class. And we specify the bin type, which is book.class. Scroll this binder. And now we say bind instance fields, and we pass this instance. So this means bind the instance fields, which are these, or of this class, which are these, or object, to the corresponding getters and setters in the book, because we have it here, right? In the book class or object that we are going to create later. That's it. So it's with this, it automatically create the bindings. What it means in practice, that means that when we change the value here in the browser, when we change this value, it's going to be reflected in the title property of the book object. Same with published and rating, but we need to actually tell it to do so. And we want to do that when we click, or when the user clicks the button, which is this is a click listener. I'll show you here the constructor. It's an event listener, and it's a click event. So when we click the button, we get here, and we need to create a new book somehow, right? Because we need to save it to the database. So this is the book, but we need to set the values. And instead of using like set title and then title.getValue and so forth, because what if the form is huge? Instead of that, we use the binder. And we can read the bin, or we can write the bin also if valid. I'm not going to go into detail of the if valid part. There's something called validators that we're not going to cover here. But if it's valid, just write the bin. Which bin? This. So it's gonna, because we have already configured the connections, let's say the bindings, it's gonna use those connections or bindings to write the values here, or actually here, to this instance. And then we can use the service, which we don't have here, by the way. Let's get the book service injected. Service dot save, I think it's add actually, the book. We are adding a new book. Then we can show a notification that says, for example, book saved. And if you think about it, when we are adding things here, we click the button, it gets saved, but this information remains there. We maybe want to clear that, correct? So we can set a new bin there, new book, or we can actually, for example, use read bin, which is maybe it's easier to understand because I'm using write bin here. So read bin is the opposite. So read this bin, read the values there in these properties, and set them in the corresponding fields that we already configured here as the bindings. So that should clear the form if I didn't make any mistakes, and should add the books to the database. Let's see if that's true or not. Let's create this book. Very original name, creative, any number there, save, book saved, it's cleared. Let's go to the admin view. It is there, so it is in the database. Very good, so it actually worked. Nothing surprising here, but what it's crazy, it's how easy it is to make it collaborative. I'll show you. Instead of using a binder, we're gonna use collaboration binder. And this requires the bin type, but also a new object, which is an object of type user info. I'm gonna call it user info, so it's easier to understand. It doesn't exist yet, so let's create a new user info. And it needs a user ID at least, but we're gonna use also the name because we want to show the name on the screen. So let's use, for both, we're gonna use the same. It's the user name that we configured already in the Spring security configuration, right? It's the username. So we have two there. But how can we get that? Well, we have to use security, context holder, get context, get authentication, get principal, and because we were using this method, this builder, we know we created user details objects. So that's what we need here. Var user details. And of course, let's use this. Let's use this user details. We need to be explicit here. Of course, we need to cast that user details dot get username, assign that to username, and now we have the object. Very good. So these are the changes required by this constructor. Now you can see that this is deprecated. Read bin is deprecated here. But it's clear in documentation that you have to use set topic instead. So let's start by exploring set topic. So we need to set a topic. What is a topic? It's kind of a chat room, if you wish. So the people are gonna be here. So this screen needs a name, right? Like this instance of this screen needs a name. So let's say this is a new book. Any identifier should work. And then we need a supplier of books, which can be implemented like this, new book. So of course a little bit more complex than the standard binder because you can imagine that it requires a bit of help to make it collaborative. And now let's fix this. And the cool thing is that there's a reset method here, and we can just pass a new instance of book. So it clears the form after we save a book. And so if it worked, if I didn't make any mistakes, let's go to this screen, and I probably need to open another one here. So let's do the following. Let's bring it like over here and this like that. And let's use the other user here, Maria. Login. And it was an admin, it was actually a new book. And you can see that as Maria is editing this, Alejandro can see what Maria is doing. So I don't know which book I was in, but we can see that Maria is doing that, all right? Rating and so forth. Save. The same for Maria. She would be able to see what any other user is actually doing here. So that's pretty impressive, right? Now, let's say that we want the users also to chat here on this screen because they need to work together. That's also very easy to do with the Vaadin collaboration engine. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change the layout. Let's create some space here so you get the idea of what I'm using or what I'm doing. So let's create a horizontal layout here. And what can we do? Let's create two vertical layouts. Vertical layout. New vertical layout. So now we'll have we have the title and then we have this horizontal layout. We're gonna move the other code later in a moment. But we have a horizontal layout that's like having two, like the screen divided in two. Let's go here. Like this screen is gonna be divided in two. And on the left, I want maybe the form. So I can just move these over here. And on the left, we want to implement a chat. All right, how to do that? We need two new components here. The first one is new collaboration message list. And let's see what this requires. It requires the user info that we have already. And it requires the topic ID. We have new book. You should maybe create a constant for that, but let's leave it as is. Why? Because it's here, right? So we don't want to have it twice. Maybe we could introduce a typo and it won't work. All right, and the other thing you need, this collaboration message list is where all the messages are gonna appear. And we need also a new collaboration message input. And that needs the list. So we need to extract these to a new variable. Let's call it just message list. And since this is so clear here, we can use var. Message list. Let's compile that. I think that's it. Let's see if it works. All right, so let's use Alejandro here. Let's use Maria here. And now they should see each other's work, right? But let's say I'm creating a new book. I don't know which layer I was, but let's say it's E. And I'm editing stuff here, whatever. And then Maria comes to this screen and sees that I'm creating this this book, right? And so she says, "Hello, Alejandro." Which I reply, "Hello, Maria." And then she noticed something's wrong. I see that you are creating the new book. You are missing an E in the title. And so I see this and I go, oh yes, I'm missing one. Yeah. Thanks. I go and fix it, save it, and everybody is happy now. So that's how easy it is to add collaboration capabilities using Vaadin. All right, so we have arrived to step number 6, which is the last step of this tutorial, where we are going to implement a view to show our report that you can export to PDF or comma-separated values, Excel, Word, you name it. Also, we are going to add a cookie consent dialog at the very end of the video. That's super simple to do, so make sure not to miss out on that part. All right, so let's create a new view. Let me close all these files. A new view called report view. This is mapped to /report, and it extends. Vertical layout is fine. Now we need a constructor here. And we're going to add some components. A new title. Actually, maybe we don't need the title here. You'll see why in a moment. But by the way, what we need is to specify the roles allowed admin. Very good. So now Alejandro and Maria can access this view. Very good. So we need to create a report. Here's how to do it. It's also very simple. So Let's create a new print preview report of books. And this class comes from the report UI component in the Vaadin directory. And then we can specify the columns that we want to show there. The columns are actually the properties, the name of the properties here. So let's say we are not interested, for example, in showing the ID, but only these three: title, published, and rating. So we can do that. Title, published, and rating. This is a report, and it doesn't show any data, right? We need to connect it, or we need to set the data there. And for that, we need the backend, which is the book service. This is how we access the backend. Now, report has a method called set items. And we can pass here all the items. So service.findAll. So we want a report with all the books. Now this is failing because I'm returning a collection here, but I know I can return a list instead, and it should work. List. So now it should compile. Now with this, actually we should get the report when we go to /report. Let's check that that's true. And we don't need two windows here anymore. Let's go to the report view. And it's loading, I guess, the stuff. There we go. So we have all the books that we have created before that come from a database. And you can configure these reports. You can add charts. You can add sub-reports. You can use Jasper reports to do it. This is using an API called Dynamic Jasper. So for example, let's say we want to, I don't know, set the title, books. So with that, and there are many other options there with Dynamic Jasper, but I'm not gonna go through that. But if you now, I didn't add the title for some reason. Maybe I didn't compile. I think I actually compiled. But let's see. There might be a bug, maybe. Maybe I should restart the application. Let's try that. And if that doesn't work, then we can just continue. But let's see. So this is part of the Jasper Dynamic Jasper API. Let's see. I hope it works. Okay, it's not really working for some reason. This set title method here. I wonder if it's a bug or what's going on. Anyway, I think I'm gonna leave it like that. If you find the solution to this, please let me know in the comments section. But it's how easy to add a report. Now, let's say we want to export this to PDF, for example. That's also very easy to do. So we need to call report.getStreamResource, and the file name is going to be, let's say, books.pdf. Then we need to specify a supplier of books, and that is service.findAll, but we can use a method reference here so it looks nicer. And we need to specify the format, and there are many formats: format, PDF, CSV, docx, etc. So let's use PDF here, and let's call this PDF. All right. In fact, we could do the same, for example, for comma-separated values. I'm copy-pasting the code here, but I guess you can imagine how to do it, for example, by iterating over all the values, right? All the values of format, and then creating all the formats if you want, or create a method that you'll just specify the format and it creates the rest automatically. I'm gonna do it like this, just because this is a demo, I guess. And here we have a vertical layout, so maybe let's create a new horizontal layout, which is kind of a toolbar, if you wish, with all the buttons for exporting the report. And here we need to create new anchors. So this accepts an abstract stream resource, which is what we got there. So for example, for PDF, it was called PDF, this one. Maybe it's not a good idea to use var here, by the way, because you don't know what it is, right? Probably it's better to leave it like that. Yeah, much better. And then you can specify a text, so PDF. And the same for CSV. CSV here also. We need to separate these with comments. And I guess that's all you need to do to export. Let's see if it works. So PDF. Okay, I need to authenticate. PDF. Now the browser opens the PDF, but you can of course save it. And comma separated value, we can open it outside the browser. Let's see if it contains all the information. There we go, all the books are there. Oh, for some reason the title is here. So you know what I think it's happening here? It was a cache issue from the browser, because now we have it here. All right, there wasn't any bug there. That's good to hear. And there you go. That's how you can create a report. But I promise I would add something special here very quickly. Remember the home view, which is public. This one here. And before anything else, I'm gonna actually remove any cookies here, just in case I have used this before. But here's the home view, and we want to add a cookie consent dialog, which is required in some places, for example here in Europe. And with that, it's so easy to do. So cookie consent, compile, that's really it. New cookie consent, and you get it here automatically. And it says this website uses cookies to ensure you get the best experience. A link to more information. Got it. Now I can use the app and deploy it legally just by adding one line of code.